Hello, and welcome to At Your End Step. My name is Morgan. I'm here with Mike.
Hello.
And we have another fun-filled episode for you folks this week. Lots of stuff to talk about. Lots of news. Lots of cold hard facts. And we're recording like a day late. We're recording on a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday, which is a good thing because we have a lot of good information to actually talk about.
Yeah, if we had recorded yesterday, we probably would have had to burn the episode. Like, light it on fire,
I just
down the river.
I just would have been so upset. I just would have looked at today's like daily MTG and been like, why? Why Wizards of the Coast? Why? I said like wizards.
Why wizards? To be fair, I looked at some of today's announcement and I still went, why wizards?
Why wizards? Yeah, it's true. We'll talk.
Why wizards? Sounds like we're auditioning for The Room. Wizards.
Oh, hi, Mark. What Rosewater, of course.
Oh, that's really good. So good.
All right, so before we jump into the community segment, we do have a ton of stuff to talk about there. But again, we also have our GP that we're going to be talking about. There was two, but we're going to really only be talking about one that happened over the weekend. Before we start with any of that, though, I have here on my show notes, my teleprompter, as it were,
I put it in all caps.
that we need to talk about our lovely Patreon.
Hey, look at that.
If you guys haven't heard or stopped listening to the show once we get to the wrap-up period, we did start a Patreon, technically recently. And if you are more interested in supporting the show and becoming a patron, you can check our Patreon out at patreon.com/atyourendstep. So a huge thank you to all of our patrons out there. We appreciate you contributing and really putting the show together on a weekly basis. You guys keep the lights on, and we appreciate that.
There's also some things you can get for it. I'm not super familiar with the reward tiers at the moment. I feel
correct.
awkward for that,
We have some lovely stickers and, of course, shout-outs. I think we will definitely look into that and update that and get caught up with everything. It's hard, not to use this as an excuse.
It's hard when we ask you for money to like do things.
Yeah, it's something that we definitely need to be more diligent about.
But it starts today with us saying it louder.
Yes,
So.
and in the start of the show, where more people can hear it. But again, thank you so much to our patrons. All right, so community. Like I said, we have like a ton to talk about. We have a lot of things that people have been asking for, and we finally have answers to, which is how do you qualify for Mythic Championships? And we pretty much got the skinny on it. If you haven't seen, there is a YouTube video that is kind of short as to what is actually being said. They focus mainly on Arena. But if you read the article, man, it's tough. It's just, yeah.
Which is the first thing I thought of. You should definitely let Bear tell you about it.
Most certainly, yeah. If you don't know, they did hire a new head of esports, so that he's in the video. And like I said, it mainly covers Arena.
Again, his name is Bear. Don't skip over that. That man's name is Bear.
It is Bear. His first name is Bear. I don't know
if he's like Cuddly or Grizzly or Teddy,
no,
but he's Bear.
Or if he's like a tutu, more than likely, probably.
What?
Because he's a grizzly bear.
Tutu?
And bears are tutus.
I'm missing something here.
Like the power and toughness of a creature.
Oh, that's I was thinking of like the flowery skirt thing for dancers.
No, I mean he can do whatever he wants. He lives in America.
Gotcha.
And it's a free country. Yes.
That makes sense. Okay,
yes.
can we just like delete 30 seconds there?
No, it's staying.
Oh.
It's comedy gold for someone. Someone's laughing.
It's not
at you, not with you. Anyway. So there are going to be 7 Mythic Championships that are going to be happening. 4 of them are going to be in paper with a total combined prize pool of $2 million across the year. And then there's going to be 3 Arena Mythic Championships with a combined prize pool of $2.5 million across the year. So the weird thing are the Arena ones. They are obviously the new thing. It seems from this announcement that they're going to be $750,000 tournaments, which is more than a Pro Tour, that are only going to have 36 people in them.
Well, at least the first one. The other ones will probably only have 32.
Well, so how it works is, let's get into qualification of it, because again, we were all laughing about how this reads like a it's so
dense.
Yeah, it's just a lot of information. So for the Arena Championships, there will be a qualification tournament or a weekend that you can participate in if you have reached mythic rank. If you're in the top 1,000
top
of
1,000.
the mythic rank, and that can be in either constructed or limited, you will receive a token for this. And once you have that token, you can participate in this magic. What I forget how the magic qualifying weekend, the MQW, mythic qualifying weekend, or what have you.
Yeah.
So it'll be a 2-day event. On day one, you have to reach a certain threshold of wins in this tournament.
Yeah, the way they said that, I wonder if since like you could qualify via limited or via standard, I wondered if like the Saturday you can continue to play the format that you want.
Yes, they did not say what.
Because Sunday's an aligned tournament where
Yes,
then the top 16 qualify.
Correct.
So that has to be one format, or I guess it could be split format. I don't know if you do that in Arena or not. But
yeah.
But I'm assuming maybe Saturday you get some choice in your format.
Potentially. I assume that these events are set up similar to your like constructed like events that you currently have on Arena, where you have X amount of wins or X amount of losses, whichever comes
Right.
first. So if you reach that threshold of wins, then you qualify for day 2. And like we already said, day 2 is an actual Swiss tournament that will qualify 16 people for that season.
It'll be interesting to see how Arena handles a Swiss tournament because it hasn't done that
Correct.
yet. So
I'm interested in seeing how it handles it as well. But the most important thing is that's 16 people that qualify for that every season. And the season currently is a month.
Right.
So that is, from the information we have, 2 months of qualification for this tournament. So there's your 32. And then the top 4 people of the previous Arena Mythic Championship get invited to the next one. But since we don't have a previous one for this first one, it's going to be the winning team of the 25th Anniversary Pro Tour and then the winning person of the last Pro Tour, which is Guilds of Ravnica. So it's going to be those 4 people that actually get invited to this first initial one, which is Mythic Championship 3. Like we're all robots now.
Mythic Championship 3, located in TBD.
TBD. Undisclosed, located, redacted. It's being held on redacted. So
Welcome to our secret underground arena bunker.
yeah, it's where they train all the underground dojo keyboard cage fighters.
It's really good.
So that is how arena qualification kind of looks at this point in time. The article has all the dates and everything that are actually relevant to it, but that's the general gist of it. For paper, there are some things that look very similar to how things have been or used to be at the very least. We will now have Mythic Championship qualifiers, which sound very similar to Pro Tour qualifiers. They are a little bit different. They're going to be for the season, for the qualification season. There's going to be 150 events that are held. And they're going to be distributed between stores as well as tournament organizers can actually run these events. Initially, for the first qualification period, there's no threshold as far as Planeswalker points are concerned. Anyone can participate. For the next qualification period, there's actually going to be a 200 Planeswalker point threshold that you would have to meet in order to qualify for this. Now, having to already for nationals, there was a Planeswalker point qualification, and that was fairly easy to meet, and that was higher than this. So 200 really is something that's fairly achievable for most everyone, especially since they are actually going to be doubling the points given out for FNMs, which is good.
Because we say for everybody, it's super easy for the US.
Correct.
It can be more difficult in places that don't have access to larger tournaments.
Also
Because 200
correct.
playing cards or points is a Magic Fest or an SCG Open. Like it's just is. But the FNM is a nice little chunk there, and they're going to start that
April 1st.
April 1st. You'll have 2 weeks of FNMs before the season starts.
Yeah.
So you'll get a good chunk going.
Right. So something to know going forward, but these again sound very similar to old PTQ systems. So I think that's a good change. I think that's after messing around with this PPTQ system, I think that's what a lot of people just wanted to go back to.
I'm conflicted about that. I agree. I mean, again, I talked a lot about in the past. We talked about the PBTQ formatting, and that led me to the Pro Tour. You know what I mean? I had PTQ, top eights, but I didn't. The PBTQ system got me to the Pro Tour, so I won't badmouth it too much.
You sure?
I will say this. One of the things that is still not really being discussed here has been some of the inherent still struggles with the judge program. Channel Fireball Events has been managing to try and put out a lot of fires, but there have been a lot of grumbles because the staffing for Magic Fest, you're looking for. There's only so many L3s, and L3s have their preferred teams. And I was a judge. Most of you guys know that I decertified. I was unhappy with our regional leadership, and it didn't feel there were a ton of opportunities for me to do stuff. We had some good L2s in this region. Shout out to Aaron Hammer. That was one of the best L2s that I know. Who he single-handedly kept trying to keep the PBTQ thing going here, but he himself said that outside of that, he's an L2 who has had a hard time getting consistently staffed on things just because it's competitive. You know what I mean? So and I apologize, Aaron. I guess I should check to see if you're okay with me saying that. So put a pin in this one, Morgan. But I just I think that it's frustrating when you look at that, because without the PPTU system, where are the L1s going? Like, what are the L1s doing? Does that make sense? Like, you don't technically have to have them for things like even pre-releases. And I know that every store uses a judge for that.
Yeah.
What are you using L1s for? If you're not running IQs, you know what I mean? You're going to need them for, there's 150 of these events. So how many of these qualifiers, these Mythic Championship qualifiers, is Ohio going to get at a season? One,
maybe two,
right? What do the L1s do outside of that?
Twiddle their thumbs.
Yeah, so what I want to know, like, how they're going to, and again, like, okay, talk about opens, this and that, like, a lot of opens coming to the Midwest. There are only so many judge slots in those, and like, you've got to stay active to keep getting put onto those things. So like, what are you going to do in the meantime? And how does an L1 become an L2? I think that's a big deal, because when you look at like our judges who are our L3s, who are the the harbingers of like the entire program. You know what I mean? Like they are those symbols. We've seen a lot of them quit recently, and as they quit, I mean, like, move on. You get to a certain point where your professional life is just your professional life, and we've had. Even when we had L5s, people like Sheldon Menery, who they were done, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, but technically, like, they don't. Everyone, is like a level 3 now.
No, I'm saying before that. What I'm suggesting though is that, like, you've got to keep the chain moving for this to work. And now, of course, the cynical person would say that the more they move to Arena, the less they have to worry about judges either. So Arena, if they going full digital at some point competitively, eliminates that problem forever, which is upsetting, because I think that. WotC has devalued the judge program a lot. Definitely in response to the lawsuit that was filed. They definitely did. And this, I think, puts judges in a weird place. What are they supposed to do? How your local judge in especially outside of the U.S. You know what I mean? Like, what is the incentive for your local judge who's not a store employee to, like, keep doing, like, local events, right? Or local event needs him. So I think if you're a judge, it's got to be worrisome.
Yeah, 100%. That's something that we don't necessarily talk a whole lot about, to be perfectly honest, but is a very valuable point to really think about and consider when all this stuff is kind of rolling out.
Yeah. So it's just something that popped in my head about that I just think, like, gets overshadowed in all of this. You know what I mean? Like what's the role of the judge in an Arena Mythic Championship?
Is there even?
I mean, assumedly, can't you still like you can't technically slow play rules as written, right? You would be getting warnings for that if you started burning your fuse in Arena, right? Timeouts don't exist in real Magic. You can't get extra time in a later turn through goodwill in the game, but you can on Arena.
It's true.
That's weird, right?
That is certainly weird, but I think that is by design. I think that they are okay with that being how that system works.
Sure, and it's interesting. I think it's interesting. So, because you'd also argue, wouldn't the role be scorekeeping? But you don't need to do that. Computer does it. So,
Yeah.
you devalue that. You devalue judges, but you still need them at some points. You're going to get into a point where you might not have enough, right? So, just a thought. I don't mean to derail there, but it just
no, it's 100% a good point. Like you're not going to be able to not run an event because you have too many players or anything like that. You're going to definitely not be able to run events because you don't have enough judges.
Right.
So if that is probably going to be one of the things that I think really, really hurts WotC if they don't figure out a solution for it in the meantime in their transition. You know, if they truly think that the future is going to be Arena and that Paper Magic, at least competitively speaking, is not going to be something they're going to want to support, then the judges are going to sniff that out.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Long before that's the turn they decide to make, which means that there's going to be this weird desolation period of paper tournaments because you can't run them.
Right.
Weird. That's going to be.
I mean, again, that is a unique. But again, I don't think it's that far off. There's already for the last 2 years been an issue with tournaments for L1s because it was PBTQ or bust, and they really wanted you. If you're going to do a competitive tournament, they want you to be geared towards L2. But it's like the college problem, right? Where you're fresh out of college, you want to get a job, but all the jobs require you to have
experience.
Have experience, but you can't get experience unless you get a job. That's how it feels to be an L1 judge sometimes. So, just something to think about.
Yeah, man, we should get someone to talk about that a little bit more. Yeah,
maybe Mr. Hammer. I'll reach out to him to make sure he's okay with me name dropping him, anyways.
Yeah,
I know we have before, but I want to make sure.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So we talked about arena qualification already. So I think that's perfectly covered. Probably not. I don't know, but
say perfectly. Again, if you're confused by what we said, refer back to Bear,
please. So the other thing that's going to be happening, obviously, is the $1 million Magic World Championship. So that's going to be 16 people that qualify for it. It's going to be the reigning champion, which is Javier Dominguez. We have the winner of each Mythic Championship. We have the top 4 Magic Pro League points leaders, and then the top 4 non-Magic Pro League point leaders. And these are not pro points; they are Mythic points.
Yes, and you don't get them from things like GPs or anything else.
No, you just get them from Mythic Championships.
And we'll get the math on that somehow. I'm also, one thing they didn't say with this, I am interested in how, so without pro points, because obviously that's one of the ways they helped decide on the MPL, right? How are they going to decide yearly on who's in the Magic Pro League itself? Because that's a whole nother thing. Because people who are in it right now who don't have a good pro season, they don't know if that means that they're out or what that, you know what I mean? What if they get a lot of numbers on their streaming, but they did really bad competitively? I don't know.
Well,
maybe their contract says it. I don't know.
You'll still get points, right? And they're going to be tracked differently because we have a an MPL ranking, and then we'll have a non-NPL ranking. So I assume that they will take the top non-MPL rankings and swap them out with the lowest MPL rankings, right?
Right.
Sure.
I guess.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, you know what? Probably exactly how the decision making is going. So.
I mean, yeah, that I think that's probably the easiest cut and dry solution. But I'm sure we'll find out about how that works maybe 2 months before it actually happens. Let's be real.
Yeah. One more thing before I move off of all these quick announcements. I do want to mention, so we said that, again, 7 Mythic Championships, $2 million prize pool for the 4 paper ones, $2.5 million prize pool for it might be 2.25 for the 3.
It's 2.5.
Okay, yeah. For the 3 arena ones.
Yep.
Right. So, I know they said the prize payout changed for Mythic Championships, so everyone gets prize who plays in the Mythic Championship.
Yes.
So they said they want it to be roughly 500 people for tabletop ones. So you can go play in a pro tour, paper pro tour, and get your piece of $500,000 divided by 500 people, or you can qualify for an arena Mythic Championship and get your piece of $750,000 divided by 36 people. That is a huge discrepancy.
I agree. I think that qualifying for these tournaments is still a bit different.
It certainly is, but woof.
I don't know how they rectify that. I think qualifying for the arena is it's so hard to like compare them.
Well,
I think they're just different experiences.
I think it definitely tells you how WotC like, and they probably should do this, but definitely tells you how WotC wants you to follow the money, right? If you make more money playing in the ones where you have to qualify on arena, it means you have probably more likely to spend money playing arena. You don't have to ever play arena or pay any money to WotC, literally any money to WotC to make it to the Pro Tour. You know what I mean? Like I played in the PBTQ and then played in the free RPTQ. I didn't pay WotC directly any money to go and play in their Pro Tour. Right, and that's the same with like PTQs. You paid the
tournament
organizer. You in turn had some amount that went to WotC, whatever else, but like that direct payment didn't happen. So it makes sense they would incentivize direct payment, like come play arena, which directly pays us. Right, it's free to play, but if you're going to play in a competitive season, like if you're going to play constructed, you go PAX.
You have to.
You know what I mean? Like we play pretty casually on there, and like I have a couple of okay like decks. Like I have like mono blue and things like that. But like if I needed to like switch for a metagame to keep grinding through Mythic, or into Mythic, I probably need to open PAX.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So I have to spend money.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. That it does. I feel like arena is something that you definitely have to take so much more. It takes so much more time to theoretically qualify.
100%. Time and money. Hopefully, you're paying them.
Yes.
So I'm surprised they'd make it limited only to do that because then you definitely have to spend money, right?
So much money.
I mean, you can grind limited for free.
Yeah.
But it's also very quickly to have a few not okay drafts and then you're not grinding for free anymore,
right.
So
yeah, it's not hard to fall off that train.
No. And drafting is also harder to do your daily stuff.
Yes, because you can't always guarantee
Right.
like you're going to draft the deck that is around your goal.
Right.
So
maybe that doesn't. Daily stuff probably doesn't matter that much to the Mythic grinder.
No,
but that person's going to spend money. That's all I'm saying. So again, obviously it makes sense for WotC to do that, but the discrepancy there is real big.
Yeah, like
It's like,
so big.
I won a Mythic Championship and I made $50,000. Oh, I won one too, and I made $100,000. Wait, aren't these billed as the same tournament? They are.
It's wild, isn't it?
Oh man, that's okay. That's I just something that's interesting to me.
So we actually moving on from sort of how to qualify for these Mythic Championships. We kind of got some idea of what the year of competitive play overall will look like for Magic. So the focus is going to be on the multiple ways to engage in competitive Magic that exist.
I thought that was pretty funny. I put that in there specifically because it was like, look at all the ways you can do it. Tabletop Magic. Their words. I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay. Arena, right? The Pro League. And I was like, but like, we had this last year with like, we literally had like competitive play, paper, tabletop, in your words, Magic Online, and the Pro Tour. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it was like, well, the MPL, look at this new MPL. It's like the Pro Players Club.
But see, the MPL is like
A lot less people.
But the idea of it is
With
that
a lot less access.
there's going to have league play. That they'll stream league
I'm aware,
play.
but like they said, these are avenues for you to engage and get to Mythic Championships. But I'm like, no, it's actually harder. It's actually harder to get to. Like, don't get it twisted here. It is definitely harder to get to a Pro Tour now.
Yeah.
I don't think that's wrong. I'm not saying that's wrong. Okay. But it's just. I feel like everything, and there's more in this too, but I literally call out an entire line of BS in this. Like it's so disingenuous. I don't like that. Like, their corporate speak has gone, it's like they leveled up. You know what I mean? Like, they got new, the new CEO, and they got Bear, and now like their corporate speak is like, your corporate speak skills have increased.
It's like have you seen all the wonderful memes that combine like the situation, and then on the bottom it just has the Skyrim like speechcraft. Like this is all this is like corporate speak. It's 100 now, which I think that is probably their angle and their strategy to appeal to a broader audience.
Yeah.
And that's what it is.
All I can think of is the Futurama execu speak now. Blank, blank. You're not worried about the big picture. Don't you worry about blank. You let me worry about blank. Now there are more ways than ever to engage in blank. If you look at the magic blank, the magic blank blank, and the magic blank blank blank.
We also have a bit of a. I enjoy how Mike has put this in the show notes, but I can't say all the words he put in there, which like it just reminds me of like Office Space with like PC load letter. What the? So this is this directly lifted from this verbatim?
So this is a quote from this, which may also be a quote from the and not article that came out a couple weeks ago with Aaron Forsyth, and there's another person on there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a direct quote. So one of the things it said was that they're also, like, for competitive Magic, they're continuing to explore new formats, and it mentioned the Duo standard format. And it says, it is primarily an attempt to mirror as closely as possible the experience most players have themselves when they play the game. As Aaron said, sideboarding does not do that, but switching decks entirely does. What? I have never played a competitive tournament where I didn't sideboard. That is my way of play. I have never played a draft tournament where I didn't sideboard. I've never played a cube draft where I didn't sideboard. We are literally experimenting with sideboards in casual brawl right now. You can... Nope, I'm going to do cusses.
Don't now on the baseball podcast. You could do cusses.
I did do. Well, I didn't. I got close. Jordan did.
Jordan does cusses all the time.
Hey, remember, if you do like baseball, I do another podcast called the Church of Baseball Podcast. We just released a new episode. Please check it out. Ding 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 ding. TM. All right.
But I don't think you can TM Church of Baseball. I'm not sure how that would work, but
hey,
okay.
Deal with it. Susan Sarandon. Yeah, you heard me.
Come after me.
Please don't. You're very powerful.
Yeah, so I don't know what do they mean by most players?
Yeah, so like again, if they're saying like most players they play a game of Magic and then switch decks, yeah, maybe, but like you can't say the year of more for competitive Magic and then say so is competitive Magic now trying to mirror kitchen
table Magic?
Like,
I guess.
That hurts my brain. So much.
I don't try to make ration of it anymore. It just is what it is. I guess.
And here's the thing. No, like I will really argue to the hilt here that is not how most players play Magic. Even when I remember my first experience playing casual Magic, and I would play Magic at lunch every day in high school because I was a super nerd. And thank God my wife loved me in high school because I don't know where I'd be right now. Ooh, I got sad. Okay, no, it's actually it's a story of optimism because I'm very happily married, so it's a story of optimism. But like, I had a friend of mine, who he played a Pestilence Circle of Protection black deck, right? So when I got frustrated with that deck, what would I do with my own deck? I'd main deck Enchantment Hate or bring that to play in against him, right? I learned quickly to identify cards that only existed for that. That's how you learn in the game. So even in casual play circles, like you could sit down and play Commander and ask why, like if you play a Commander with a group of people who've never played before, and that's an interesting card choice. They will probably tell you this person plays this strategy often, so I've had to put this in my deck to combat it, right? So people literally are geared to play in a way that they make their decks not just changing decks, but they pick their favorite deck, and they try to gear it so it can beat the most decks or a specific deck if need be, which is the concept of flippin' sideboarding. I gave you a flippin'. I gave you one of those.
I appreciate it. So with your analogy, how they would interpret it as, it's not a sideboard, it's just a new deck.
But it wasn't a new deck. I didn't have 2 copies of it. I took cards put cards into it, and then took some cards out. That's actually sideboarding.
But after you put those new cards in, it then became a new deck.
If that's literally the logic they're using, and I think you're right, I don't think I've ever been this angry, and I'm about to actually have an aneurysm. If the podcast stops
here, you know that I'm right.
If the podcast stops like right in the next 5 minutes, know that I died and Morgan still uploaded it because that's what I would want him to do. I want my live stream my death.
I'm definitely not putting you're
yeah, I want a snuff podcast. Give me one of those snuff podcasts. I'm going to be the world's first. Nah, I'm going to say no. There's definitely snuff
Oh,
podcasts.
100%.
They definitely exist.
Oh,
When I
yeah.
hear a person die,
There's literally like that's like probably the tamest thing you can purchase on the dark web. Like,
you could probably sell those and it'd be nothing.
yeah,
I didn't hear anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
they died.
you idiot.
Just sold them silence.
Well, geez,
Oh,
let's quit the
man.
podcast and just start selling
Yeah,
death
we're just gonna
podcasts.
start doing that.
See you later, suckers.
I would say this got real morbid, but yeah, exactly. But I mean, like that. You're probably right. Like, but if that's the argument, like, well, yeah, sideboarding. It's not sideboarding. It's just building a new deck.
Because
What?
if we remember in Duo Standard, it can be anything, so it can be the same
course.
exact deck.
But that logic doesn't actually follow because those
No.
decisions are made in response to a stimulus. Like that's the idea. Like sideboarding is made in response to
I know.
Stimuli, which I guess makes it alive. Isn't it like it can like grow and responds to a stimulus is like the definition of life. So there you go.
Sure.
Magic finds a way. But like that of course the response there is that people make those changes in response to a deck that they have seen and played against. That's not true in this Duo Standard format. So I think that's frustrating because I know Aaron Forsyth knows better. And that's executive speak right there. This is better because players don't really do this, and Watson keeps doing that with these weird stats, right? Like most players want to play best of one. Look at how many people are playing best of one. It's like, but I don't have another choice. Yeah, but you loved it. But
Look how
no.
much of it you played.
But I didn't have a yeah, but you played so much of it. But I want you to do well. I'm supporting you guys. Yeah, and we're supporting you by giving you best of one. No, you're not. No,
Why are
you're
you
not.
like this?
God. So I mean that's what this feels like, right? It's like you guys want to do a standard. You guys asked for this. What? No, we didn't. Well, but you didn't like the sideboard. But you gave us best of one standard. There are no sideboards. Yeah, but you loved it.
But look at all those decks you built when you were playing kitchen table Magic, and you just had like your Slivers deck, and then you had your Goblins deck, and then you had your Merfolk deck. Well, what if you do that in Standard in a competitive tournament where you could just bring all your favorite decks with you? Well,
Yeah.
just two. But
Yeah, but here's the deal. Sometimes my Goblins deck played Boil because Merfolk needed to die, so I killed all their islands. I did it. I
Yep.
did that. All right? It's great. And sometimes my brother would play his little green Stompy deck with all the Rancors. I'd play Perish. I'd be like, look at all those dead green creatures. I got them all. They perished. Why does this card exist? I don't know. As a younger player, I could not answer why I could destroy all islands.
other than to upset your brother.
Yes, I mean, like, oof. But in all reality, like that's a learning curve, and I think like you can't say that you want like the most for competitive Magic and then like devalue like that entire element of deck building and like nuance and competitive play. You have to like, well, it's hard to follow in between games. How is it harder to follow than just like switching a deck anyways? You want someone's attention span to be just like on a new deck, new strategy? Like there's really not a difference there. I don't know. Maybe they've got to have something that's telling them that they're right and I'm wrong. But I do not believe that is how most players play. Because I remember being the casual player that loved the concept of sideboards because like I was already doing it.
Yeah.
And casual players are already doing it. That's a natural progression to the game.
I don't disagree with you, especially if you want to be a competitive player.
So
I think it's I think like they choose not to do it because they have bad data, and I think they probably really consider it to be a way that people disengage from the game because it's difficult. Sideboarding is difficult. It is something that you can play a lot of Magic and still be very bad at, and still have moderate success, but still like not grasp the concept of being a good person at constructing sideboards and sideboarding. And I think they see it as a hurdle and choose to find ways around it because they think that is the key. That is the key to unlocking Magic to a broader audience is by cutting out one of the more difficult and harder to understand concepts of the game.
I guess it's really frustrating too is like this concept of Duo Standard, like they have already had to make a ban, which we're going to talk about shortly, but like a ban specifically in best of one, because of course that leads to it, because you can't play hate cards that would stop such a card in best of one. That card, Nexus of Fate, which we're going to talk about in a second, has not had oppressive numbers in best of three formats. We're going to look at the top 8 or the top 32 of Magic Fest Memphis. Warren, do you know what the number one overall played card in all top 30, or I think it's 32 lists we got in Memphis was?
I have no idea.
Negate, followed by Duress, right? Most of those cards are not in the main deck. Those cards are in sideboards, and they allow decks to compete with the card they had to ban. So their duo standard format doesn't have those answers built into it. So when you've already had to make a ban based off of it, whatever crappy data you've decided is data, which it probably isn't. I work in a field that pretends things are data. They're not. Right? And also, people aren't data. Just a side point, just so you know. I think that's frustrating and just outright ridiculous. It's self-serving. You know what I mean? Did you take the survey that they released last week? How do you play Magic?
I don't think I did.
I took that survey. It never asked me how I play. It asked me what formats I play, but it just said standard.
Well, standard's a lot of different things now.
Yeah, it didn't say traditional. It didn't say best of one. It just said standard. And if that's what they're using for their data, and they're going to use it to support things, it didn't tell them anything.
Nope.
So I did put Brawl in there. They put Brawl, and I clicked it. So you got my little click on Brawl. Anyways, let's continue.
Yeah, I agree. I think like this is.
God, I got so angry. You made me so angry.
Why did I make you angry?
When you
I
suggested,
didn't
like,
make any of these changes for Watsy.
A deck when we just shift some of the cards, isn't that just a new deck? I guarantee somebody
100%.
like had that conversation.
100%.
And I have to hope that like some of the designers literally like just like their brains all broke for a second.
Because it's all siloed off to them. Because I'm sure that they think when a kitchen table player builds a deck, they are building just a 60 card deck. And it is all they care about. They aren't setting aside other cards for sideboarding. They just put their 60 card deck in their deck box and take it to their kitchen table, and they go, "Here's my deck." And then when they make those changes to the deck, they put their 60 card deck into their deck box and bring it to the kitchen table.
But the thing is, though, we know that they know differently because they've made so many good decisions, recognizing that like casual Magic is much more about sentimentality.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is my favorite.
So
I want to keep playing my favorite, so I will change it to do this. Like, they are so good at, like, the lore does that. The Commander stuff does that. They are good at building off sentimentality. Again, we talked about this last year. I bought a bunch of boxes of Dominaria because of sentimentality. You know what I mean? So, whatever.
So the only conclusion that we should probably safely make from this is that the people that understand this are not the ones making the decisions.
No, and
about
that's
it.
definitely true. But it makes me sad that, like,
Yeah.
I mean, Aaron Forsythe,
people that we know we can depend on, don't have that power.
Like, it would make like that duo standard article would make a lot more sense coming from like Mark Rosewater. But there's a reason Aaron Forsythe's the one that delivered it, and I can't believe that Aaron Forsythe, the person who has had success at the highest levels of the Pro Tour, actually believes the stuff he wrote. And if he did, that's sad.
I agree. All right. So the other thing that we want to talk about in regards to Magic Fest and Grand Prix and sort of the professional Magic scene is video coverage.
Video coverage is dead. Long live video coverage.
Correct. So you will not see a Grand Prix being featured live streaming from the Magic channel. They are going to reserve that channel for other video streams of other Magic persuasions. But
also Mythic Championships.
Yeah,
like,
Mythic
like
Championships.
Cleveland will be streamed this week.
Yes, but not at the GP level. All of that video coverage will now be handled through Channel Fireball.
If it happens. They aren't going to do every GP.
Correct.
But the fact they're doing anything is good.
Yes. And this is a pretty healthy assumption you probably could have made that Wizards, would not be hosting it, and that it would be on Channel Fireball to really be the ones wanting to do that. So they're going to do Magic Fest LA. It's going to be the next one that does get streamed. So
and
there
probably
you
have
go.
LSV, which is nice.
Yeah.
So I like the team of LSV and Gabby, and like when they've had like Ben Stark. So
Yep.
We'll see. And I would assume maybe Reed. I don't know if he'll probably do some coverage over there for them too. So
Probably.
It's nice they're getting anything. It's nice that Watsy finally made a real announcement about it. Like, I'm sure they were waiting for this to do all of that. But,
Yeah.
Whatever. It's so weird, but there you go.
And so next up, we alluded to it, but there has been a best of one ban list that just got created, and Nexus of Fate got put on it.
Cool.
I don't, as they put best of 3 into the game as a way you can ladder, I have not ever played Best of One, and I don't know I ever play Best of One anymore. So I don't know how that even looks at this point in time. I don't know what that format has shaken out to be. But if Nexus of Fate made you hate life in Best of One, you don't have to worry about it now. So now you probably just have to worry about playing against stupid aggro decks. So you're welcome. I don't know.
So I want to at least mention a couple of things here. One, they heavily suggested that like Nexus of Fate isn't overpowered or like isn't a design mistake. It may not be overpowered. 7-mana Time Warp probably isn't overpowered. As an instant that you can't get rid of, yes, it probably is. It's definitely a design mistake. You had to ban it. So you don't get to say it's not a design mistake. Like, there's no way around that. Like, you messed up. It should have done something else. One of the main reasons that this got banned is because of this 3-hour match or whatever. Like, it was a 3-hour. Yeah, it was very long. I don't know if it was 3 hours. But Shahar Shenhar getting locked out by his opponent who couldn't win the game. He could just keep casting Nexus of Fate but do nothing to progress the board state.
Correct.
So this is something that happens in Arena often, and it's a game of concession chicken.
Yeah.
It can't anymore because they banned it. I feel bad for any person who sat in that loop playing that game of chicken who wasn't Shahar Shenhar because he was streaming when it happened. And a WotC opponent or WotC player or employee, there we go, came in and like pseudo suspended his opponent for a couple of hours.
Yeah, they temporary banned him.
Yeah, so they could end it, and this definitely prompted this. There's a whole host of other problems there. Arena definitely hasn't figured out the like timeout issues. That's something they're gonna have to figure out for Mythic Championships because you will have to instill a clock. Man, that's going back to the judge question. You're gonna have to have a clock, so you're gonna have to have somebody monitoring that.
Clock's internal, man.
But it can't be if you have a round clock.
Maybe you don't.
It'd be interesting to see how they put in that. And once they put an internal clock in there for competitive play at Mythic Championships, I better see it in ladder play. Like, I better see it in ladder play. Just saying. They already have a time limit set up when they send it out to stores for how stores could do best of one drafts. Because they had a round timer that was different. It was like 20 minutes for a round. So they already have thought about it, and they have to. But anyways, I digress. But I think that's crazy that they would suggest it's not a design problem and then do this. But it is. I think it is absolutely hilarious that they printed this card that people have been frustrated about. They still can't fix the paper problem where when you see it at Mythic Championship Cleveland this weekend, you'll see mountains, those sweet mountains getting cast.
Or swamps.
Whatever. It can't be the Bant colors. So,
correct.
So that'll be hilarious because it's only a foil, right? So that alone being a frustrating problem with it. They already said that it will not be reprinted in the, because there was some consideration to see if it would be printed in one of the Challenger decks as a non-foil. It's not. It's not getting printed there. So they had that issue with it. And like, so not only did they get like the pushback from that card in general, then that card inadvertently showed them the flaws in their own arena coding. It's like they're just getting punished all over the place for it. So, but I think like, again, how can you suggest that Duo Standard is the best when you've had to already ban a card for its use in that format? Because the cards that are meant to naturally prey on this card can't exist. So, cool idea.
Yep.
Next up in bannings, Ancient Stirrings. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, Card Clan Ironworks is back. Just so you know. Semblance Anvil .deck is coming around. It's great. Should have gone for the Should have gone for the Opal.
You should have gone for the Opal. Yep.
Yeah.
We'll more information on that when it happens. If
when it happens, I like when.
If like the semblance, the non KCI deck is actually like a real thing.
I love the fact that the card that replaces Card Clan Ironworks in that deck is called Semblance Anvil, because it's like, what's that look like? It kind of looks like a semblance of
KCI. The last thing that we did want to mention real quick that actually happened, got announced today, that he announced on his personal Twitter, was Brian David Marshall, BDM, as many know him. He is the Pro Tour historian, if I'm not.
Yes.
Yeah. He is. He's going to be retiring from coverage. He is getting a new job, pursuing a new career, basically, and will no longer be available to do coverage. And he had a nice tweet, and it definitely had a lot of his thoughts written down. So I would suggest if you have the time to definitely go to his Twitter, check out the things he has to say. Just so in pay respects, BDM has been a face of the Pro Tour for such a long time, and truly is irreplaceable. It feels like. I don't know who has the history with the game and the just everything that he is for that. For coverage, I don't know who fits those shoes, but the Cleveland Championship will be his last.
Yeah.
So if it's not something that you have tuned in to watch in a while, maybe I would watch this weekend and get as much a BDM as you possibly could.
Yeah, I'm going this weekend, and I'm going to see if I can't snag a couple minutes of that man's time. And if I can, I'll share the results here. So because he's definitely a figurehead for a lot, and sort of the bridge, I think, for a lot of people between like the pro community and maybe like not just grinders, but like that casual viewer, like BDM. Maybe like BDM and like Hagen are like the two sort of like faces you're the most familiar with, the voices you're used to hearing. Hagen throwing it to BDM like that. It's kind of a thing. So
yeah,
I'm sad.
They pull you in.
They really do. BDM's on the floor interviews with people where he's like out of breath because he's running around to snag people, and he's just as excited as that person. Those are always great.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that doesn't get said enough about him is that he does such a good job with players of every nationality.
Yeah.
Like he works through the translators. He does everything he can to make sure that like every kind of player is talked to.
Yeah, the man's a consummate professional.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, but that's going to be everything for community. Like we said, definitely a lot has happened. A lot to talk about. We got lots of new answers, lots of new questions. So just another week as being a fan of Magic the Gathering. So before we move on to the competitive segment, I do want to give a quick shout out to our lovely sponsor, Comic Town. They're going to be hosting Star City Games Regionals for our region. It's going to be. Did they announce where it's going to be actually held yet or anything?
I know. If I had to guess, it'd be in the convention center. If I had to guess, because regionals are normally pretty big.
Yeah.
Sometimes other times they have done the hotel there in Hilliard. So I can't.
But
I'll check.
To check out more information about the upcoming regional tournament, definitely go to Comic Town Gaming Center on Facebook or worldofcomictown.com. And we do encourage you to, obviously pre-register so that you can guarantee your spot. Again, these things tend to sell out, so definitely check it out.
It's actually going to be in the store.
In the store. Well, hey,
cool.
they do have
the new
a
store can hold a lot more players than the
exactly.
old one,
So moving on to competitive. We do have a couple of GPs to talk about. One of them, of course, is Strasbourg, which was sealed, limited GP, I should say. It was taken down by Yves Sillet, I'm going to say. Sure, Yves Sillet. So congrats to Yves. So one that we're really going to be, talking about here is going to be GP Memphis, which was standard.
Playing Magic in Memphis.
I don't know why you put modern here, but it was definitely standard.
Oh, I don't know why I put modern there.
It's all right. Playing Magic in Memphis.
Magic in Memphis.
Yeah, you're all welcome for that, I guess.
Oh, man.
It was won by Jody Keith playing Rakdos midrange, defeating Corey Burkhart playing Sultai midrange. It's a real. It feels like we're back in Ravnica because it's just like midrange decks out the wazoo. But so this is something that is hilarious to me because when this was when what before Guilds of Ravnica or when Guilds of Ravnica was going to be coming out, we had. Mike and I had tried to figure out what a Rakdos midrange deck looks like, and we tried a few things.
This was in Ixalan.
Okay.
This was with Ongroth.
Gotcha. And trying to figure it out, and it's just really the mana wasn't there. And couldn't really like do much with it. So it's kind of interesting to see like some of the same ideas that we had in brewing finally like reach their fruition.
So the goal there was to that was when I was like really trying to see if I could push like Wily Goblin, which I know, but Wily Goblin and Treasure Map into like, can we ramp into earlier like Chandra's? Can we and like, I like red-based mid-range decks that can, because some of the red-based planeswalkers have been a little interesting. Like, at least when I built these decks, before obviously I had Chandra Pyromaster and Elspeth in red-white was obviously when I started really working with that and enjoying it. But that concept of like building red decks that can curve into robust threats that are difficult to interact with. I think when you look at this deck, it only has one main deck planeswalker and Karn Sign of Urza, but the card that's taking up that slot as well is the Eldest Reborn. And I think one of the things that these decks do so well is that they're tough to sideboard against. You want to normally have a lot of creature removal, and don't get me wrong, you want creature removal for this deck, but a number of the creatures do interesting things. Things like Direfleet Daredevil is going to be a 2-for-1 most of the time. Rixmati Reveler, especially if you're doing what you're supposed to do with it, is going to be card advantage. Goblin Chain Whirler takes things out with it. Rekilling Phoenix takes 2 removal spells if you don't have the Exile. CJ Commander, I guess you need 4. I don't know.
He brings the whole party.
So the idea here is that like the threats are hard to deal with. So you think about like how well CJ and Commander lines up against like Wrath effects, because you don't have to commit much more to the board. Right? Or how good it is against Swarm decks, because now we've got a lot of bodies here, and then they've got to deal with your creatures. Then you bring in more planeswalkers. You have difficult to deal with enchantments. You're drawing extra cards from your treasure maps. I really like these builds of decks because they push in so many directions. I've been saving up. I had used a lot of my wild cards because I built 2 standard decks on Arena. One of them was Wyatt Darby's deck, and Darby, you lied to me. That deck was bad. I knew I shouldn't have pulled the trigger, but I wanted to, and you lied to me.
It was fun for a little bit. I
just want to play Dovin, man. That's all I wanted.
Yeah, it didn't.
But if you
don't play Dovin, I have a Dovin deck for you that I've been playing. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, yeah, ship that.
Yeah.
Dovin has been my new Brawl commander as well, and oh man, Dovin's sweet. Anyways, though, I like these decks for that reason. This deck attacks from so many different angles, and really does something that I think gets confusing for other decks, which is play the card advantage game better than even some of the other mid-range decks.
Yeah.
You don't get your Hydra Crassus here, like you do in Sultai, but unlike those decks, you don't have an anemic clock, and you have ways to actually close out games, because Sultai mid-range mirrors are just these gummed up, horrific affairs. This deck doesn't worry about that. The other thing, too, is that this deck gets to play red removal spells, which makes it much better against the mono blue decks, which are so good right now. Mm-hmm. Because I played that Sultai matchup. I played mono blue. That's what I've laddered with now. I was laddering with it before it was cool. Also because it didn't require like any rares. It was literally nothing.
Yeah.
But the key here is like you get to play Shock. There's no equivalent right now. What are you going to play? Deadweight?
Yeah.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, Sultai might have to. But you also get like Carnival Carnage, which I think is a card that is just not getting enough credit right now, because it is bonkers against mono blue.
Yeah.
Because you have, in this deck, you have 5 turn 1 plays against that deck, plus you have Goblin Chain Whirler, which is already very good against that deck. But then, like, later in the game, obviously having a discard spell is pretty good as well. Those Sultai decks and other decks don't get to do that against mono blue. So it doesn't surprise me to see him. He already was doing well with this deck. Jody Keith is doing this. I love it. I want to play this deck. Like, this is the deck I want to play. I might just build it on Moto instead for now, since it's 49 tickets.
It's super cheap. But yeah, this is like one of those. Decks that you look at it and go, "How does this win?" But definitely like figures it out. And I played a little bit with it on Arena when Jody Keith did well with it in the Open, and it is definitely one of those decks that you need some time with. I think it has interesting lines of play and does a lot of different things than a traditional sort of like green based mid range deck would do. So I think if you put the time and effort into it, or if you like these kind of strategies already, like like in Mike's case, I think this will definitely get you a lot of value. I do enjoy Legion Warboss though. I just love that card.
Oh, yeah.
I just playing that card. It feels so great all the time.
Oh, looking forward to the rest of the sideboard.
Weird.
But no one needs that.
But I mean, this has a lot of cards that I think that we have picked out that of being like good sideboard cards or cards that we expect to see more once we actually got Ravnica Legion.
Right.
So you see Angrath as showing up as like a one of in the sideboard in Theater of Horrors.
And I
as
could
well.
certainly I could see Angrath making it to the main. It's a card that's gotten a fair amount of buzz because of how good it is against things like Hydroid Crassus.
Yeah.
You cast a big Crassus, I'm attacking you with it, and I'm sacking it.
Yeah.
So,
it's great.
this is an 8/8, so you gain 4 life. Okay, well, no.
Oh, I'm going to attack you. And you're going to weirdly lose 4 life.
Yeah, weird. It's little quid pro quo. There we go. So I think that I remember with like the Big Boros deck, and I've joked on here before about had some people like who tried it out and they were like, "Oh, I don't like this deck. I don't understand what it's doing." It's because it's a value deck, even though it's like red, and I like red value decks, and this is a red value deck.
Yeah, 100%.
So this is kind of like that big red deck we had before, right before Rival Allegiance.
Yes, I remember that. That was a lot of people said that was that you had the mono red deck, the
Right.
aggressive deck, but this larger mid range deck, you had a lot of people saying like that was the best red deck to play in that format before Ravnica Allegiance came out.
Yeah, so I definitely like where this is at and what you can do with it. So, and like I said, we mentioned the sideboard also is Theater of Horrors, which I think is another sweet sideboard card. So
yeah, 100%. We can take a look at Corey Burkhart's Sultai mid-range list here real quick. Nothing, again, too revolutionary. These lists seem to be sort of settling. We do have a couple flex slots. We see like Carnage Tyrant kind of come back into the fray a little bit. As well as like Hostage Taker.
Yeah, Hostage Taker's taking over some of the Chupacabra slots.
Yes.
Because they are essentially Chupacabras too.
Yes.
Hydra Crassuses.
Yes, 100%.
So and sometimes you get to cast your opponent's Crassus, and that's the name of the game.
And then in the sideboard, that's where we see kind of things take a shift. I've noticed like Crawl Harpooner was a little bit of like everywhere.
I like it again. Crassus it kills, but Drakes it just takes down Drakes, and the Drake decks have moved a lot more towards Spell Pierce in the main. So like when you're sideboarding, like obviously they might have Dive Down still, but Harpooner's a good way to get around negate because like they are incentivized to have some Spell Pierce negates for your Vivians and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's cool to have Harpooner as a way to be like, oh, actually, you know what? Gotcha.
Yeah, and it's just a way that you potentially have a way to interact profitably with a Drake on like your turn 3.
Yeah, that is also kind of interesting. So
because I guess the idea is like they're going to shock your elf.
Yes.
And then you'll already be at 4 power to kill a Drake. So, I mean, like this is the de facto sort of mid range list. It's just better Golgari. You're going to see it a lot, and you're probably going to see it a lot this weekend, to be perfectly honest, if you are watching the Mythic Championship. The other list I want to talk about is the third place list, which is Gruul mid-range. And I know that we talked about Jody Keith's deck and how some people look at it and be like, how do people win with this? This is also how I feel about this deck in a lot of different ways.
I assume this is the one that you were like that meme where you kept like looking back at this deck. I thought this was your deck.
I mean, I built this deck on Arena for sure, and it is weird. It is just weird. It was piloted by Shota Takao, and it definitely feels a lot like the Rakdos midrange list. To be perfectly honest, it's heavy red, heavy base red. We still see Siege Gang Commanders. We still see Direfleet Daredevils. But we and Chain Whirlers, but we're mixing it up a little bit. We're adding some Growth Chamber Guardians, we're adding some Zertog Goblins, and of course the one, the only, the Gruul Spellbreaker. And that's kind of what our creature suite looks like. And then our removal spells are very similar still. We have Shocks, Lava Coils. We do have 2 Lightning Strikes, and 2 Collision Colossus.
I like that card.
That card's versatile. It definitely has. You definitely get people with it, and that is one of the things that I did appreciate playing with a little bit, because I definitely got to kill. Like, I had one of. I was playing against a control deck, and maybe it wasn't a control deck. Maybe it was like a mid range list or something like that. I can't remember, but I still had one after doing all my sideboarding. I still had one left. in my main deck. It felt kind of iffy about it, but then my opponent played a Lyra, and I was like, I got to collision it. I was like, this feels wrong.
Yeah, that's pretty good. There's a lot of good flyers to kill with it. Pumping is also just a way to get people.
Yeah.
And things like Gruul Spellbreaker, pretty good at getting pumped because you can't kill it in response.
You sure can.
So, what's the real draw to this deck?
The real draw to this deck, I don't know.
It's got to be the mana base, right? So people were raving about this week, and we got to talk about Unclaimed Territory.
Yes, this is so I definitely playing this deck named Goblin a lot.
Yeah, so it's either Goblin or Warrior.
Yes.
Right? So when you look here, obviously CGN Commander, Goblin Chain Whirler, and Zerta Goblin are goblins. Growth Chamber Guardian
is a
warrior. Goblin Chain Whirler is a warrior. Gruul Spellbreaker is a warrior. So
they all come out to play.
They do. So it's kind of like if you're wondering how a Gruul deck that's running 4 Unclaimed Territories can get away with playing Goblin Chain Whirler, that's how.
Yep.
And it's kind of interesting because I think I saw a couple articles this week like running with some like different lists and how a couple people like I think like this may have broken something, right? And I don't mean like it's like broken as in like the game's messed up, but sort of broken open a door with how we've looked at mana bases here because we obviously have these 3-color mana bases we can push in a lot of directions, but Unclaimed Territory sort of got forgotten about. You know, it was a staple. It's a staple in humans and sometimes spirits.
Yeah.
But in Standard we can maybe do a little bit more with it. And looking at some stuff like this, like again, like this weird deck that's again it's got basic force. It shouldn't be casting, Chain Whirler, and yet it is. So I think that's spicy. I think it's real spicy.
I don't disagree with that sort of that analysis or that sort of sentiment in figuring out where this goes. Like, what do we do with this information? What and how can we figure out if this can translate into other builds? Because obviously, you do have to dive like a level deeper. You have to look at creature types now when you're considering your mana base. And I don't know if that's always conducive to what you're building, but I think that you're right that this like broke a mold of some persuasion as to like what you are currently looking at your mana base and what it can actually do, and makes people want to dive that level deeper to find like what's that next level thing.
And like we don't have much in the way of like in like allegiance or allegiance or guilds of Ravnica, like they're built guild wise, not creature type wise.
Yeah, not tribal wise.
But we're still in an Ixalan standard, and that's definitely tribal.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder what like could a Merfolk deck see a little bit of shift going this way? Could we do something more with it? And I think like I think again, not having looked at this, you're gonna have to pay a lot more attention to even like the War of the Spark, just to pay, because like how often do you really pay attention to creature type unless you are like thinking you're like tribal, but Unclaimed Territory is like, oh, hold on. Mm-hmm. Wait a second. So I a lot of credit there, and I've seen some other lists. I saw a Thud list that was now doing this, which I thought is sweet. Just let me play Colossus or Collision Colossus and Thud. Like, why not? We'll do the old two for there. So I think it's kind of interesting. A little bit of spice.
I agree. The other two lists that we probably want to take a look at, there were 2 mono blue tempo lists, one piloted by Steve Rubin, and the other one piloted by Toru Inoue. And again, this is just the little deck that could. Showing up and being something that is definitely going to be on the big stage, definitely going to be at the Mythic Championship Cleveland, without a doubt. And we also have a mono white aggro list piloted by Eli Loverman. Oh, excuse me, Loveman. Loveman, not Loverman.
No, it's Loveman.
I corrected myself.
That's an Adventure Zone slip right there. His name is Boyland.
His name is Boyland. And we noticed that this is not a... we don't see a splash here. It's just 20 planes, all white creatures or spells. So maybe the just the blue splash is kind of falling out of favor. Maybe it's not worth it to take that much of a hit to your mana base to try to pull it off. And clearly, you can just play this list just fine. It is important to note that I think like Tithe Taker is becoming more of a popular option, not just in this list, but in other sort of white X like creature decks or mid range decks. So I think people have shifted to potentially looking at this as being something that is impactful on the board.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Like the tax on it isn't super relevant, but if it slows them down even one turn early, they obviously play it on their turn. Like I'm not sure, but just the 2-for-1 is nice.
Yeah.
I will say, this is the kind of deck that's okay with keeping A, one landers more often than other decks, and B, like those first 2 land drops are critically important. And just the difference between having 20 planes versus any deck that has 4 Glacial Fortress in it, there are going to be hands where you have 2 Glacial Fortress. You can't do that. Like that's just miserable.
Yeah, it's too slow.
And for having no blue cards in the main, I think a lot of people have decided that this is the better build of this right now. Now, again, the format could shift again where you desperately need like negate.
Yeah.
But Esper Control is really on a downshift. It's still in the top 32 here, but there are less Kaya's Wraths instead of the Wreckages right now. You don't want to slow yourself down trying to play for those decks. So I think it's interesting. I also, again, we have Unbreakable Formation, which Tom Ross tells us is the draw to this deck, and I have to believe it. So.
I mean, if you take a look at Kaya's Wrath and that being something you're fearful of, well, then there's an answer you can play game 1 main deck and it'd still be effective.
Sure.
And then lastly, rounding out top 8, we do have Kenta Harane playing Simic Nexus. And this is the Nexus deck that we do see here in the top 8. And it pretty much, it feels like if you're not playing Gates, this is where you've ended up. So maybe you don't even have to play Bant anymore. You are just playing, really leaning on the synergies that Unclaimed Territory, Wilderness Reclamation, Unclaimed Territory. Wilderness Reclamation provides you with.
I really like, it's only one up here, but I really like Precognitive Perception in these lists. That seems like the perfect card with Wilderness Reclamation because you want to get the addendum on that, and then you want to tap just Reloaded. So I think the real key here for Kenta's deck here is his sideboard. His sideboard plan, I think, was incredibly solid, and you should probably appreciate it as much as you hate these decks. His plan is to load up on mana creatures and then board in his Biogenic Oozes.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. When your opponent decides that they're going to bring in all their negates and duresses, right? If you can still stick a Wilderness Reclamation and then a Biogenic Ooze, if they boarded out most of their removal spells, which they probably did because you have 2 creatures in your deck. Also notice here that he's not even playing, again, this being straight up Civic Nexus, not Bant. There's no Teferi here, right?
Right.
There's just no targets for these things. So then your Biogenic Ooze lives, and then you just make tokens. All of them. All of the tokens. Hey, did you know you can stack it so that your land's untap while the put a counter on your Oozes trigger is still on the stack? So you could make even more Oozes then? Huh. That's a good plan. So, his sideboard plan, I think, is what really elevated his version to the top here. And I have to assume that's going to be something they adopt. Transformative sideboard plans are not new, but in this deck, they are going to overload on sideboard cards against your lack of creatures. Biogenic Ooze is the way to just... I just would like to imagine how many people were like, okay, cool. I have negate ready. I'm okay. And they're like, he's like, turn 4, turn 3, whatever. Wilderness Reclamation, turn 4, Biogenic Ooze. Get an Ooze, and you're just like, wait, what? You're like, yeah, okay,
I'm just
cool.
gonna die to that. Cool.
So,
also, notably in the sideboard, Ken Harane hates flyers so much. He's playing Atsukan Archer in Sagittarius Volley. Crushing Canopy.
So I will say this: Atsukan Archer is actually, I think, pretty good against the mono white decks too.
It's just like an early 1/4.
It takes something out with it most of the time.
Yeah,
and it can just block everything.
Yeah.
So
I don't disagree with that.
It's definitely fine against flyers, assessment. But I would be very happy to have that card against mono white. So.
Man, the Sagittarius Volley though, man, that's
hateful.
That's like, are you playing mono blue?
Weird. Hey, I'm gonna kill this X4.
Yep.
And all those.
All your other.
So I will say that card seems spicy, but I don't know if I want to be playing volley against the deck that had like people think like Crushing Vines is good against that deck, but man, it's so rough against even Siren Storm Chaser. So you gotta pick your spot with that card.
I don't disagree with that. So that's top 8. What else here in the the top 32 really draws your eye?
I should mention we do have Esper Control in the top 16, 13th place Michael Hamilton, and 15th place Rob Pisano. Karn is making an appearance in the main deck here, and I think that Karn is a card that's slowly seeing an uptick as just a card advantage machine. We had it in Jody Keith's list. We had it in the sideboard of the Gruul list. We have it here. Not huge numbers, but I think Karn is one of those cards that's just been consistently hard to evaluate. Like, it's obviously good, but what's your game plan with it? I think that's been key. But beyond that, the Esper decks are in a weird place at the moment. They have a lot of really good spells and the mana to cast all those spells, but I don't know if I play mono blue a fair amount. The mono blue matchup for Esper is a bit of a nightmare because the games where they have one drop into a Curious Obsession with protection feel impossible for the Esper deck.
You just get out card advantage.
They just never don't have a counterspell. They hit every single one of their land drops, and all of your things that interact with it outside of like Cast Down, maybe Moment of Craving, cost so much mana. Like, how are you ever going to resolve it? And then the mono blue player does not have to overextend into your wrath spells. So you take your whole turn 4 to maybe resolve a wrath, and then they just reload.
Yeah.
So obviously the games without a Curious Obsession are easier to navigate, but I still wouldn't call them easy. They're not faster than the red decks, but they offer disruption that is a lot more difficult. Absorb is the natural enemy of the mono red deck. You just play your counterspell, and it's twofold good. Absorb is actively not very good here. It gets spell pierced away, and it's so slow compared to what they're doing. So you're playing this control deck that you want to have a pretty good aggro matchup with because of cards like Kaya's Wrath and Absorb, and the mono blue deck just says no. Those just aren't relevant for me. So I think it's in a tough place right now.
Yeah. It's tough when you are playing the control deck and you don't have a good aggro matchup.
Right. And then how many Moment of Cravings and Cast Downs can you play when Simic Nexus top 8s? So Esper Controls, I think it's just in a tough place. Is there a build that could be the good against all of them? Maybe, but if Mono Blue Tempo continues to be the aggro deck du jour, it plays so differently from Mono White aggro and Mono Red aggro that just how can you prepare for all builds of them? Speaking of Mono Red aggro, did make a top 16 appearance here.
Yeah, I did want to mention that for sure.
I do think that it is crazy that we have the best mana we've had in years, and we have 3 monocolored decks in the top 16.
Yeah, it just proves that, realistically, look what drives that. It's those 3 pip creatures, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Because you have the Marshall, you have the Jin, and then even when you're looking at mono red, you obviously still have Chain Whirler. Now, Chain Whirler is the one that has broken the mold where people will still play it in like 2-color decks. But even with those decks, they are still base red, very, very much so. So,
I didn't think about that. You're right, man.
I think it's weird that
poor Dreadshade.
Yeah, well, Dreadshade was just always going to be bad, unfortunately. But I honestly think it's kind of surprising that we don't see the mono green deck anymore. That it really didn't get the tools it needed to compete.
I will say the mono green deck, compared to the rest of these, I think the mono green deck just doesn't make sense because some of the Gruul cards are too powerful to ignore.
Yeah.
If I'm playing the mono green deck, I want Rhythm of the Wild. You know
at least sideboard.
Right.
Yeah.
I want access to that card. I want Gruul Spellbreaker. I want access to that card. So I think like you are already inclined to move into Gruul that way. There are some builds that I've seen on Arena. I have definitely been attacked by rioting Galtas. That is a bad feeling. Like, okay, I think I turned the corner here.
You did not turn the corner.
Oh, you're attacking for 12 right now. That's
that's no good.
Huh. In addition to all the... Okay.
All right. Well...
I'm going to scoop.
I'm dead. It looks like...
So. I definitely played mono blue against those Gruul decks. And I'm way ahead here. I'm good. I don't have a counterspell for this Galta. Spell Pierce doesn't do that one.
It can't be Spell Pierce.
That costs 2 mana, huh? That's weird. So yeah, so I think like that's maybe where that goes. But we have Nexus of Gates in 17th place, which is the other version of the Nexus deck. The drawings there being Circuitous Route and Gates of Blaze themselves are pretty awesome, and of course Guild Summit.
Yeah.
So I just want to go ahead and say thank you again. When we did our Palooza, and I was saying please make the Gates deck, I didn't think there'd be multiple different builds of the Gates deck. It's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, you can do. I mean, Gates are good.
We have a lot of fun here on this podcast.
Make a lot of jokes,
and we say a lot of negative things about WotC, which is obviously a love-hate relationship because
clearly
we say bad things about that company in our Magic the Gathering themed podcast. So we know who the real idiots here are, and it's us. Like we're the rubes, but this is a real testament to the design here that in a format where I just said the mana is so great, we can have monocolor decks and decks that forego good fixing for slow fixing.
Yeah, you're playing a bunch of tap lands.
I mean, I don't want to like you should be patting yourselves on the back here that you have decks that want the shock lands and the buddy lands and they're playing them, and you have decks that don't want anything to do with them, and you have decks that still want to play 4 or 5 colors and still don't want anything to do it. Like that's crazy to me. That is, people have said that like, oh, I don't know how like this format's fine, but no, this is a great standard format. You ignore some of the obviously we have some cards that are still very very powerful. Teferi is on a downswing right now. Nexus is not fun, and people are going to be casting their mountains in Cleveland. But this is a really diverse format. You can play a lot of different cards, and you can play crazy mana bases and do what you want.
Mm-hmm. And it still holds true of it being not necessarily a format of like diverse, like archetypes. Like they're not just a whole bunch of different. There are like a varied amount of archetypes, but it's not just like. A modern, nearing modern level of archetypes, but it is a lot of variations from deck list to deck list between set decks in a particular archetype, which I think is good. And then the only other thing I wanted to note is we only have one Is It Drake's list in 32nd place, so that is a deck that. You look at it and you look at some of the players that are really good with it on like the open, like Brad Carpenter. And you're like, how does this deck ever lose? And it's so wild to me that it's just not more of a presence here in Memphis.
I look at the sideboard cards we looked at in the top 8, though. We saw multiple copies of Cruel Harpooner. We've seen Crushing Vines. We've seen whatever the Sagittarius Volley or whatever. Yeah. Like people are prepared.
It's true.
They really are. And when people's 2-drop creature trades with your 4-mana creature, and you have to have protection at every level, Niv Mizzet's not the end it was before. And I think the other problem with Is It Drake's is the builds it used to have, where it was more combo based, those were shut out by the Sultai decks. So then it's gone into this more, we're going to get there eventually stuff. You can't run those other decks out of threats anymore. Like Hydra Crassus has changed the game. Mm-hmm. So I think those decks are going to have to rebuild. I wouldn't be surprised, depending on what Cleveland brings, to see people go back to some quicker versions of it, maybe even going back to Phoenix.
That's true.
Because if people are going to board in a lot of like flying hate, we'll make it recursive then. So it'll be interesting to see if Is It Drake's can survive from there. I do want to mention one more deck, just quickly. Sultai Counters, Nicholas Shipman. This is a Hadana's Climb deck, but it's got some interesting choices. It's got it has a Cruel Harpooner in the main. It has Orzhov Enforcers in the main. It's also playing a number of copies of Fungal Infection in the main. And I think that is a card we just said, like, what is Sultai going to play? Deadweight? He seems to have found the answer here in Fungal Infection.
Yeah.
That's a blowout against the mono blue decks. When they see the Sultai decks, that, heck, I think it was, who was it? It might have been Chapin, but somebody wrote an article where they flat out said that like the secret for mono blue players against Sultai is just go for it because they don't have it, right? Because they just don't have enough 2-drop removal.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of mono blue players have played that way, and you see the deck get a lot of success. How are you if you're the guy who's like, okay, cool, turn 1 this, and you're like, yep, and he's like, oh, you have a swamp, okay, well, yeah, I'm going to put this Curious Obsession on. You're like, okay, Fungal Infection. You probably just sit there for that's on Arena where you see you cast it, it's on the stack, and like, oh, you're upset, aren't you? And then all of a sudden you have a 1/1, which you may think, oh, that's not important. Actually, against mono blue, you could start just immediately applying a little bit of pressure. And it goes all the way to Nullhide Ferox, which is kind of interesting. That's a big flying boy, with a Hedonist Climb. So this is a pretty interesting build of this deck. I just wanted to at least mention it, and then mention how good Fungal Infection is right now. Hilariously, 2 copies of Fungal Infection in the main, no copies of Assassin's Trophy in the main. Because that's the state of format we are currently playing.
I do think it's unfortunate that we talk about having such a good mana. Sometimes in these Sultai lists, it's definitely hard to bluff a turn 1 play.
That's true. I said Swamp. He doesn't have any.
Yeah, exactly. Most of the time, you're the black you're looking at is going to be your Water Graves, your Overgrown Tombs, and your check lands. But you're not bluffing anything. You're taking 2 damage for a reason.
I mean, that's not true in sideboard games.
No,
if you've shown them a Fungal Infection, you can definitely shock and bluff turn 1, and just put them on it, just shock, and it's like. Am I going to put my Curious Obsession on this?
Yeah.
I don't think you are.
But if you're playing your game 1, I guess they would have to know what you're playing first and foremost.
But so if you were playing blindly against this deck, and you were the mono blue player, and you went turn 1, your Sirens, Siren Storm Chaser, right? And then your opponent goes shock a black source, pass. Are you still going to put Curious Obsession on your creature?
I mean,
you should.
Yeah, 100%.
But
hopefully, I'm playing it with protection, though.
Hopefully, but who knows?
That's true.
So I think it's at least interesting.
It's definitely interesting.
I said swamp, and I looked at there's no swamps.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really I'm glad we got 32 lists here. It's real diverse. We see shifting within the archetypes.
Yeah.
I'm excited for Cleveland. Let me ask you this: Do you think there's another archetype hiding that we haven't seen yet? Is there something that hasn't had the surface scratched? I would have argued personally that there was a Gruul deck, but now we're seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say there's got to be a Spellbreaker deck somewhere, but now it's here.
It's true.
So is there a deck hiding?
Well, the nice thing that we have had within the guilds, within Ravnica, is all the guilds feel like they're fairly evenly represented.
I don't disagree with that.
So it's hard to say well, if we look at the success of that, could there be something hiding, in the rough within that? I feel like there's always that potentiality, especially since I really feel like we are in a very powerful standard format as it stands. I would say that I'd be with you, Gruul, that seemed like there's all these cards that all this hype, and it kind of petered out. But now we had that kind of happen. We had the kind of tech with Unclaimed Territory happen, which is another thing that wasn't on people's radar, but now it is. I would say that I wish that there was. I don't think that that's going to be the case, unfortunately. I think it's going to be a lot of Sultai, and that's what people are going to be focusing on. So I would say it won't be that. It'll be, how did you break the mirror? That's going to be the question. Is it Biogenic Ooze? Is that how you're going to go about attacking the mirror, or what's the mirror breaker? I think that's what people have to figure out.
Yeah, I don't disagree. If a deck is going to come out and do something, it has to be a deck that's going to tangle with both Mono Blue and Sultai effectively.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard to do. So I agree, it's probably Mirror Breaker. I will throw this out there. A deck that I've played against a couple times in the ladder. Now, granted, I'm in Gold 1 right now. I haven't played much this season.
Yeah, neither have I.
Some stuff, stuff at work has come up that it's just I don't have time for this. But and then this last week when I've played, it's been limited because I'm going to limited tournament this weekend. But there's been an Azorius Angels deck that's going around. It had Resplendent Angel, had Shalai, and had Lyra's, of course, and just played some slight disruption with it. And I do, we had Boros Angels before. I wonder if there's an Unclaimed Territory Angels deck that you could play more Azorius but still get things like
Aurelia,
if you want it. Aurelia seems fairly interestingly positioned right now. Against some of the sideboard removal, maybe not, but against two of the the 3 decks that were in the top, or 2 of the 4 decks in the top 4 were playing. You were playing a lot of Lava Coils.
Mm-hmm.
Man, Aurelia, Lyra, pretty good against Lava Coil. So I think it'd be sort of interesting to see, because I think like those Angel decks too. Like I've been playing Mono Blue, and you can get ahead of those decks, but you're not playing a lot of straight up Essence Scatters. And if they resolve something like a Lyra, you have to have Merfolk Trickster, or you might be done. So it's kind of interesting to see if maybe you could do that. Shalai also causes a lot of problems for a lot of decks.
Yep.
So if there is something that's not seen, I think it would be some version of the Angel deck coming back that just is like a really good stuff mid-range deck that's just playing just bomb flyers, just a lot of mythics.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying it will, but I'm saying that's the one that comes to mind. My heart would love to see